With how unanimous social media is nowadays, it can be hard to remember a time when it wasn't. When the concept of meeting people online was novel and MySpace reigned supreme. But as facets of life continued to manifest online, they were quickly forced to confront its opposite: death. The thought that your profile, your digital footprint could outlive you felt morbid. This idea was discussed for as long as blogs were popular, but it wouldn't become mainstream until the creation of a site called MyDeathSpace. While obituaries existed online before, this concept was unique to the internet. It tied a person's death to their MySpace account, all without their family's permission. The internet has forgotten this short-lived yet highly controversial website. Because of this, I thought it'd be interesting to do a deep dive into its story and the debates that surrounded its existence. But before we get into that, here's a brief word from my sponsor. This video is sponsored by Raycon. Nowadays, people listen to music on their phones more than ever before. Because of this, it's important to have a pair of high-quality earbuds. With over 50,000 5-star reviews, Raycon is on a mission to provide premium audio at an affordable price. They offer essential smart tech listening features, with my favorites being their noise isolation and crystal clear call quality. It's perfect for everyday use, from playing video games with friends to going on walks. They fit very comfortably in my ear, which is a make or break for me when it comes to earbuds. I don't like having to fiddle with them constantly, and thankfully that's not a problem with Raycon. Not only that, but they offer free domestic shipping and can ship internationally for a flat fee. But best of all, they start at half the price of competition. That means you'll be paying half for the same, if not better quality earbuds, enough that you could still afford a second pair. So if you're ready to buy something small with a big impact, click the link in the description or go to buyraycon.com/BernieVids to get 15% off your purchase. Once again, that's buyraycon.com/BernieVids. The origins of MyDeathSpace trace back to a small community on LiveJournal called MySpace Death. It was started in 2005 by Michael Patterson, a 25-year-old paralegal from San Francisco. Mike's interest began after 2 teenage girls were slain by their father. Out of morbid curiosity, he searched up their names on MySpace, only to discover that their profiles had become makeshift memorials. This voyeurism soon became routine, to the point that he started posting about his findings. They surprisingly gained an audience who shared a similar fascination. Given the subject matter and eventual privacy complaints, the page was destined to be short-lived. LiveJournal began imposing restrictions and even threatening to ban his account. Because of this, Michael turned the community into its own entity. And on December 16th, the first iteration of MyDeathSpace.com was launched. Welcome to the new MySpace Death site. LiveJournal has become too restrictive, preventing us from posting information like full names and pictures. They've also attempted to shut down the community multiple times. It's now time to move on. This version was quite archaic, using a simple weblog software. Yet within months, it was receiving so much traffic it suffered bandwidth issues. By the summer of 2006, it averaged 100,000 hits per day. There'd been nothing like it before, so its existence was surreal. I asked people who were on MySpace at the time if they remembered the site. Their responses were interesting. They recalled that while most were aware of it, they didn't actively pay attention. It was an, oh, I guess that's the internet now sort of thing. You'd see people joke about it, riffing about the day they'd end up on it. There were many copycats like MyCrimeSpace and MyWhoreSpace. Even MySpace Tom weighed in, though the interview is no longer available. The articles followed a simple format: a photo, the victim's age, location, and cause of death. The link to their account was typically embedded in the image. In cases of homicide, the victim was displayed next to the assailant. They eventually created a map charting each death geographically, represented by black skulls. By 2008, that entailed over 10,000 different cases. This was only feasible with a team of volunteers, who helped sort through hundreds of submissions every day. For such a ghoulish subject matter, MyDeathSpace accumulated a sizable fan base. They populated the forum, with the majority being women. As a result, they referred to themselves as death hags. There, hags would speculate on what loved ones felt and how the act was committed. Mike attempted to monetize this loyalty. He hosted several merch runs over the years. There were pins, wristbands, and t-shirts, but the most popular was a premium membership for $35. It offered typical forum features, as well as something many found pretty questionable. You will have access to articles 24 hours before they're published on the website. But surprisingly, a decent number of people did pay for that privilege. knowledge. It's unclear how much the site made in its prime, as Mike refused to disclose profit figures, but he emphasized it was only a side income, as he began working for an unspecified search engine. With the site growing at a rapid pace, it wasn't long before MyDeathSpace found itself in controversy. And that takes us to the debate over whether or not it should exist. For as many people who supported MyDeathSpace, there were an equal amount of people who found it despicable. Mike received so much hate mail he created a subforum for it. Early critics argued their articles were an invasion of privacy. Because of this, it became policy to remove entries upon request. But that didn't stop user discussions, which often continued long after retraction. It begs the question, is it responsible to publicize and document such matters? In this section, I'm going to cover both perspectives as it's quite a nuanced issue. To start, let's go through the arguments against it. Mike's original blog was anything but tasteful. It was chastised for its morbid humor, with one pointing out it'd serve a meaningful purpose otherwise. His attitude would change after leaving LiveJournal, adopting a more professional approach. But the behavior of his audience is a different story. Shortly after the site's launch, he waged war against the comment section. He wrote in a post, "It appears some people are leaving disrespectful comments for the deceased. Overly disrespectful comments will be removed. However, witty comments are appreciated and greatly encouraged. We believe in free speech, but family members and loved ones of the deceased visit the site, so keep the racist stuff to yourselves." When it didn't stop, he became more aggressive. Mike went so far as to threaten outing trolls with their personal information. "We have been spending hours every day removing obscene and rude comments. If we have to remove a comment you've left, you will be banned from this site. No warning, just an immediate ban. We first implemented a technique to validate email addresses. Now we have implemented a ban system. If this doesn't work, we will either create a page of names and email addresses so users can email you directly, or we'll be forced to start moderating comments." Eventually, he decided to remove the comment section entirely. Even if it wasn't their intention, the site became a useful tool in trolling campaigns. This isn't an inference, but stated explicitly on Encyclopedia Dramatica. It reads, "MyDeathSpace claims to be a place to pay respects, but they know as well as everyone that nobody just randomly searches the internet to pay respects to people unless there's porn involved. The site is actually just a way for us good folk to get a quick laugh and satisfy our morbid curiosity, as well as feel better about ourselves, because, you know, we're not dead and all." Nothing is more emblematic of this than the case of Mitchell Henderson. Mitchell was a 13-year-old boy who took his own life in April of 2006. The combination of his age and how it occurred paralyzed his community. Following an assembly, former classmates created a virtual memorial on MySpace. It was filled with eulogies from mostly preteens, tasked with confronting death. In those first weeks, his loved ones were able to grieve as normal, but that ability was taken away from them once he was listed on MyDeathSpace. That May, the site published an article about Mitchell. It included a newspaper clipping and link to the aforementioned memorial. This caught the attention of 4chan's random board, who used it for cheap laughs. They mocked the eulogies, fixating on a comment that repeated the phrase "and hero." This was quickly adopted as a shorthand for the act. Before long, they were inventing aspects of the story to justify further harassment. For example, claiming he'd taken his own life after losing an iPod, or that his father had abused him. These lies were repeated so often that they became fact, and the result was a several-year-long troll campaign. Trolls began editing the boy's likeness to resemble racial caricatures. They made accounts of him as a zombie to spam pornography at his peers. They pranked news stations and guest books in his name, and before long, it even extended to real life. His family's personal info was found and spread online, leading to voicemails mocking their deceased child.
Yeah, this is Mitch. Can you pick me up by the, cemetery? I'm kinda dead. Oh, yeah, where's my iPod at? Bye.
This continued for over a year straight. One even went so far as to visit Mitchell's actual grave and place an iPod on his headstone. It's not implausible to say that if MyDeathSpace didn't exist, none of this would have ever happened. But to what extent is the site liable for the acts of others? Its own community found this all disgusting, but were unable to stop it. Mike can't control how others abuse the information, and in his defense, MyDeathSpace arguably had more positive effects than negative. Now, let's look at the arguments in favor of its existence. Undeniably, a large part of the appeal was sensationalism. Many were in awe at the more absurd deaths, which were as gruesome as they were premature. But others found value in understanding the fragility of life. It was uniquely haunting to scroll through a deceased profile. It'd been abandoned without warning, frozen in time forever. Their memories, journals, and interests. They never knew their last login would be their last. Even more depressing was how preventable those deaths often were. From drunk driving to drug overdoses. It was sobering in a way a PSA could never be. In fact, many parents would end up using the site as a learning device.
But it's letters like the one he got last week from the mom of 3 boys that keeps him going.
Thank you for creating the site. I sat my teens down last night and made them look through all the recent deaths just to show them that they're not invincible.
But what about the families of those discussed? While many found it intrusive, others found the articles therapeutic. Sue Anderson was a mother whose daughter took her own life. Upon finding Michelle on the site, she demanded the entry be removed. But then she began reading the form, and joined to correct misinformation. This gradually turned into helping them understand who her daughter actually was. Eventually, she was posting regularly to console others about mental health issues. Sue recalled, "I had a member message me that she would never ever again think about taking her own life. And that was worth so much to me." These comments from complete strangers often helped people process grief in a way not typically afforded. And while it's easy to dismiss the site as exploitative, interactions like these also wouldn't exist without it. To dismiss it entirely would ignore all the ways it genuinely helped people. MyDeathSpace received news coverage from its very inception, but it wouldn't be until after one specific event that things spiraled out of control. It all began on May 18th, 2007, when a woman named Christine Hutchinson was accused of hiding her miscarried fetus in a freezer. 4 days later, MyDeathSpace posted an article about the incident. Because there was no mugshot, the submitter assumed they found the right person on MySpace. They hadn't. In reality, that Christine Hutchinson was a high schooler from Philadelphia. The teen's inbox was quickly filled with death threats calling her a baby killer, among other colorful messages. The error was corrected a few hours later, but the damage was already done. Her face continued spreading with the story. Christine recalled being so traumatized she rarely left home in fear of being attacked. Maybe an overreaction, but that's the perspective of someone unfamiliar with the internet being accused at random. This incident was highlighted in an article by Megan Barr for the Associated Press, one of the largest news agencies in the world. The result was the largest spike in growth MyDeathSpace had ever seen. The sheer amount of traffic led the site to become unresponsive. Their host even blacklisted their IP under the belief it was a DDoS attack. It was at this point that you started to see it discussed on daytime television.
MySpace.com has become popular for bringing old and new friends together.
But now a much different and some might say morbid website is paying tribute to MySpace users who've died.
On the one hand, you may think these are just creepy or morbid, but in fact, they can help to preserve someone's life and even share that life with potentially anyone, anywhere in the world.
Their coverage fixated on the many philosophical and ethical questions raised by its existence. It's fascinating looking back as their perspective is so remarkably different. Today, sites like Facebook have built-in functions to memorialize accounts, and we tend to accept the idea of internet immortality without second thought. But back then, it was this completely brand new concept that they struggled to process. One conversation I find interesting is with culturologist Shirley Steinberg.
Is this, as you say, memorializing? Is it keeping her alive, or is it not, the inability to deal with death?
Because death is still a big taboo in our society.
It's about the last taboo. But there's talk about taking away your agency. It's bad enough that you're dead. But then people, your parents or your friends or even an ex-partner decides, I'm going to take ownership of this dead person and I'm going to make them the way I want them to make. I don't know if that's very, very private.
The grieving process has become more public, that's self-evident, but why do we feel inclined to mourn in front of the world? I have a few guesses. The internet made it possible to affect hundreds, thousands, even millions of people you've never met, and that naturally is reflected in death, especially given it lacks the physical constraint of a funeral. The idea of controlling someone's legacy has always existed. We all come to terms with death in our own ways, but once your entire social life is documented online, it feels necessary to establish that narrative publicly. This coping mechanism is now a public narrative. But that's just what I think. It'd be interesting to hear your take in the comments below. While MyDeathSpace received an insane boost in metrics, the growth was only temporary. Its popularity quickly declined as the site's novelty wore off. I mean, MySpace as a whole lost relevance over the years, and the conversation shifted to Facebook. By 2013, the site's homepage was replaced with a redirect to the forum, as Mike drifted away from the project. Though activity has only declined further and further, it remains up to this day. This is likely out of obligation for those who bought memberships, as it no longer generates profit. In spite of all the controversy MyDeathSpace caused, it's been forgotten by the internet at large. I'm not surprised. The site's greatest accomplishment was starting a conversation, but it's still interesting as a time capsule. It's a reminder of how impossible it is to understand a time period if you weren't there. There's always these little details that, while not vital, altered people's perception, and things we accept as normal today were once seen as bizarre. To that end, MyDeathSpace is deserving of respect. What began as voyeuristic became a genuine attempt to foster meaningful conversation, and because of it, Mike was able to get hundreds of thousands to confront the issue for the first time. Anyways, that's all. That's all. I don't have anything else. If you have vintage MyDeathSpace merch, message me on